A dispute over a memorial. Ari, a small statue in Berlin, is to be dismantled. But it commemorates a major injustice, the forced sexual slavery of thousands of women by Japanese soldiers during World War II. And it represents courageous women who will no longer remain silent. Why the story behind Ari is still provocative and causing international ripples. To which crimes does Ari speak? They're fighting to keep the memories alive.
My name is Natalie Chung-Hwa-Han and I'm from South Korea.
My name is Bin Li and I'm from China.
Steffi Richter, formerly from Leipzig, now in Berlin, Germany.
My name is Lai Wanxing and I'm from Taiwan.
I am Michiko Kajimura from Japan.
They're fighting for the memory of women forced into prostitution in World War II, the so-called comfort women, and for the Ari Memorial. Ari tells a piece of world history. In 1941, Japan attacked the American fleet in Pearl Harbor, and the Pacific War spread. World War II entered a new phase. Japan conquered large areas of Southeast Asia. The war involved military operations on land, at sea, and in the air. By 1945, Southeast Asia was firmly in Japanese hands. What followed was a terrible plan. For the well-being of their soldiers and to maintain troop morale, the Japanese required women for their brothels. In conquered territories and colonies like Korea, they abducted women and forced tens of thousands into prostitution. The women suffered mass rape, disease, and hunger far from home. They died in their thousands and returned badly scarred after the war. The Japanese called the sex slaves comfort women.
They were meant to comfort the soldiers at the front, but there is nothing comforting about it. There were probably more than 400,000 women in such stations in China, in Manchuria, that is northern China, in Indonesia, the Philippines, Taiwan, Hong Kong.
Around 2,000 comfort women that was officially recorded in Taiwan, and many of them are mostly indigenous Taiwanese women.
Ari is a reminder of these crimes and stands at different places around the world. In Berlin in 2024, a group celebrated the statue's 4th birthday, and the Korean community was joined by guests from all over the world. A school class from Korea, an activist from China, members of parliament from Seoul. The memorial means a lot to the people here. But the celebration was also a protest. Together, they're fighting against the removal of the statue, which has been planned by the mayor of Berlin's Mitte district.
We once again demand that the district mayor finally recognizes all these important historical achievements of the comfort women protest movement.
Again and again, suspicion has arisen that the Japanese government is really behind the plan, and not without reason.
The Japanese government is trying to exert influence all over the world to have the statue removed. And you have to ask the German politicians why they are allowing themselves to be put under so much pressure by the Japanese government.
How can a small statue spark such reactions in the world of high politics? And why is the Japanese government still intervening against Remembrance 80 years later? How can Ari be so provocative?
And become a symbol that people want to get rid of. It's a government that thinks this hurts national pride and is, of course, a blemish for the Japanese government.
The Korea Association not only put up the Ari statue, it also maintains a small museum in Berlin dedicated to the abused women. The museum keeps their memory alive and gives thousands of nameless women a face. After the war, the women forced into prostitution faced further difficulties. Many could not return to their old lives.
They often lived in isolation, separated from their families in completely different places and regions than where they were once taken from. And even if they were able to return to their families were ashamed, and they didn't talk about it openly.
For almost half a century, the so-called comfort women remained silent about what had been done to them. Until August 14, 1991, when a woman spoke for the first time on Korean television about the traumatic events. This triggered a wave of outrage that continues to this day, a turning point.
The fact that they were able to talk helped the women a lot. The women said that a switch was flicked in their heads, because they always thought they were guilty. But now they understood that it wasn't them who were guilty, but those responsible.
It was a liberation. More and more women spoke out. In China, Korea, Indonesia, and Taiwan. Shame disappeared and victims took control of their story. Awareness of the issue grew around the world and reached the perpetrators.
Through the courage of Korean women and then other women, the topic arrived in Japan. 1997 was the first time that this problem was at least mentioned in all school textbooks. Since Kim Hak-sun from South Korea came forward as a victim, many groups in Japan have tried to raise awareness for and address the problems of comfort women in various parts of Japan, especially in small groups of women.
That pressure led to a historic agreement between the South Korean and Japanese governments, and to an apology from Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
我々は従来、歴代の内閣が表明してきた通り、反省とお詫びの気持ちを表明してきた。その思いに今後も揺るぎはありません。
But for the women and even men in Korea and China, the story wasn't over yet. They continued to demand further justice and appropriate financial compensation to restore the dignity of the women affected. And they want legal recognition of the injustice, so the memory of the so-called comfort women is kept alive.
지금 만족하지를 못합니다. 왜냐하면은 우리가 살아온 지난날 생각하면 지금 돈이 문제가 아니고 우리가 인간 자체.
Despite its earlier apology, the Japanese government continues to push for removal of the Ari statues worldwide, as here in Busan, South Korea in 2016. Visible memorials to the crime seem undesirable. There was outrage not only in South Korea, but far beyond. The Ari statues resonate strongly. Even Japanese women have started turning against their own government.
It's not just a women's issue. It's about Japan's colonial rule.
Now the Ari Peace Memorial in Berlin has been slated for removal. It seems the long arm of the Japanese government extends here as well. The Korea Association received an ultimatum, and district authorities are threatening to impose heavy fines if Ari is not removed, ostensibly for violating a building code. But is the real reason something different? Berlin is twinned with Tokyo, so the memorial to a Japanese crime may be unwelcome. The women behind the memorial feel misunderstood.
What we really wanted to highlight by erecting the statue wasn't the crimes of the Japanese government, but the courage of the women who broke their silence. Because that's unparalleled.
The details may seem confusing, but what's clear is that what initially looked like a local dispute over an Ari statue is actually about global politics. In 2000, the United Nations declared sexual slavery to be a war crime. That was a decisive step, thanks in part to the tireless struggle by affected women in various countries.
That was introduced into the UN and officially adopted under Resolution 1325. Rape during wartime is a war crime and a violation of human rights. In general, not just seeing this as a women's problem, but seeing women's rights as human rights, all also fell into this period of the 1990s. That was a process of realization among the global public.
Young women are also getting involved in that process. Lai Wanxing from Taiwan studies in Berlin and supports the Korean women in her remembrance work.
It is important because it is not really being talked about, especially in Western discourse. And in Taiwan, I also feel like it is like comfort women as a subject is oftentimes being left out of the conversation. It is a subject that everyone should be talking about that is not talked about enough.
Bin Li from China, who's lived and studied in Berlin for several years, is also fighting alongside the women.
Because this is not a very important issue for Korean, but also for Chinese. We have all the government and the people have discussed about it for a long time. So I think this is an important topic for us. Until now, they haven't found a solution that all parties agree with or satisfied with.
The generation affected is dying out. So remembering the so-called comfort women is especially important, with memorials such as the Ari statues in places like Berlin. It's a task for the next generation.
This is a struggle we have to undertake together.
Wie können wir das ins kulturelle Gedächtnis mit herübernehmen, nicht nur auf der Ebene der Nationen, sondern global?
Ari statues have been erected in many parts of the world, and they've sometimes been taken down and then put up again, often due to protests. Everyone here is agreed that the Ari Peace statue in Berlin should stay, along with the memory of the so-called comfort women, their suffering and courage. Their stories are not history. Sexual violence against women in wartime continues, and it is too often simply ignored.